Hi everyone, we're live right now. Hi Mayor, can you hear me?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the City of Waterloo Council meeting, Monday, May 30th, 2022, 2 p.m. Let's begin this council meeting with a roll call, beginning with Ward 1, please. This is a sound check.
I can hear
Councillor
you,
Freeman,
Mayor.
I can hear you, but I don't
Okay,
hear
good.
anyone else.
And I don't see Councillor Hanmer on the panelist list.
Okay. Okay, well, let's begin the roll call, assuming you heard the rest of it. Begin the roll call, begin with Ward 2, please.
Councillor Bodley, present.
Councillor Freeman, present.
Councillor Vassic here.
Councillor Henry here.
Councillor Bonagore here.
And the mayor's here as well. Moving on, we would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather and are broadcasting from today is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. I do have a statement from council. June is Pride Month, and June is just around the corner. June is Pride Month, a celebration of diversity and members of the 2S LGBTQ+ communities. It is also a time to acknowledge the hardships experienced to receive equal rights, representation, and visibility. In the midst of these celebrations, it is important to remember that Pride grew out of protest. 2S LGBTQ+ folks demanded that they be afforded the same basic human rights as straight cisgender people. As a city, we acknowledge the many achievements and contributions made locally by members of 2S LGBTQ+ communities. We reflect on the harm experienced in our community, in particular within our systems and institutions. Respect and dignity are integral to the programs and services provided to residents, and we recommit to evaluating how delivery can be improved regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. So let's celebrate this month alongside our 2S LGBTQ+ friends, family, and neighbors, and let's remember Pride Month celebrations continue because there's still more work to do. And I'll just acknowledge to those listening in that Councillor Hanmer has indicated that she is here at the meeting. I'll just ask for a disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof from councillors. Hearing none, we'll look for approval of minutes, and we have one set of minutes here from the May 9th council meeting, and I'll check in with Ward 1 to see if the sound is working, and we'll consider moving this the approval of minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Hanmer here. I will move the approval of the minutes of May 9th and vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley, I'll second the minutes and vote in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries. Moving on to delegations. We do have a delegation here today, and it's the Children and Youth Planning Table. And with that, I will turn it over to Allison and Garanka to give us a presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Great. My name is Garanka Vukovic, and I'm very honored to be here to speak to you a little bit about the work of the Children and Youth Planning Table. I am one of the co-chairs of that planning table, and today I have Allison joining me. We are excited to share with you some of the data that we have gathered from our young people in the community. But before we do that, I'll just say a few words about who we are as a planning table. So collectively, we are over 60 organizations that work as a network around the table. The CYPT is not just any collaborative. We are the go-to group in Waterloo region for system-level child and youth well-being work that spans across all cities and all of our townships. We are pan-regional. Some examples of some of our members that you would be familiar with include the City of Waterloo, the Waterloo Public Libraries, Kids Ability, University of Waterloo, and others whose logos you might recognize from the slide in front of you. When we talk about who is actually specifically involved, that would be 748 adults from across our community and over 300 young people, youth, who work together and are focused on how we impact child and youth well-being in our community. And now I'd like to invite Allison, who will say a few words about some of the specific work that we've been able to do and specifically our Youth Impact Survey. Allison, over to you.
Thanks, Granka, and hello, everyone. Great to be here with you. If I could have the next slide, please. My name is Allison Pearson. I'm in the manager seat on the staff team with the CYPT. And as Granka said, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the concept of well-being and then the measurement that's connected to it through the Youth Impact Survey. So when you're thinking about well-being of young people, I'm guessing at least one of these items that's on your screen currently comes to mind. Things like being protected, being healthy, learning. These are the 9 domains of well-being that the CYPT thinks about when we're thinking about well-being of young people. And it's in alignment with UNICEF Canada's Index of Child and Youth Well-being, which was informed by young people across the country, including young people in our community. And at the foundation there at the bottom, you'll see we belong. And the membership feels strongly that belonging is a very key foundational aspect of well-being. And when we're focused in on belonging and good things are happening in that space, we tend to see good outcomes in other spaces. Next slide, please. So hopefully you are familiar with the Youth Impact Survey. Hopefully that's at least a term that's familiar to you. This is a survey that we've had the chance to deploy twice now in our community. The first time was in the summer of 2020, and then we were able to last year in May and June 2021 deploy it again. So last year in particular was amazing. We heard from over 1,000 young people in our community from all corners of geography from ages 9 to 18. And we've been able to summarize that data for the community and are currently in the midst of releasing monthly snapshot reports. And these snapshot reports are a look at the disaggregated data by some subpopulations. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk to you in a moment about specific information related to the City of Waterloo. But before I do that, I'd like you to just take this slide in. It's these 9 dimensions again. And when we look at the survey results as a whole, we definitely see some concerning trends. So you see one green arrow there, that's a little bit of a bright spot where we notice that the incidences of bullying that young people are speaking about through this survey are improved from 2021 compared to 2020, but in 5 other areas, we see trends that are headed in an unfavorable direction. Things like civic engagement, feeling like you have too much stress in your life to manage well, your sense of belonging to your community. And so we're trying to make sure that the community as a whole understands what young people are sharing through this tool, because it's one of our best tools locally to hear directly from young people about their well-being. Next slide, please. So what we're going to spend a couple of minutes here, not too long. I'm just going to give you a little taste of some of the information that we can see when we disaggregate the data by geography. And Waterloo did exceptionally well in terms of representing the city in the survey. We had a total of 354 young people who identified Waterloo as where they lived, and that equals 39.2% of the sample size. So Waterloo showed up in a big way, which I think is exciting for you as council to use this tool, knowing that so many young people's voices were part of it. So next slide, please, and I'll show you just a few high-level pieces of information that might interest you. So sense of belonging. We can see here for Waterloo that young people's results were trending in a more favorable direction here, so into the more strong or very strong arena. However, it's also important to keep in mind that for about 1 in 3 young people in Waterloo, their sense of belonging was on the weak side. Next slide, please. Self-assessed mental health, I would say, is a concern as we look across the board in this survey. It's particularly high numbers that we're seeing, where kind of about half are in a space of feeling that their mental health is not doing well. So you can see, Waterloo's favoring slightly more into the positive, but I'd really have you pay attention to that large proportion that are suggesting for themselves that it's not in a favorable space. Next slide, please. However, at the same time, physical health, you can see a lot more favorable scores coming in for this one across all geographies, but particularly in Waterloo, where 85% of respondents are rating their physical health as more positive. Next slide, please. This is a question that's asked on the survey about hidden homelessness, and I wanted to draw your attention to this for you in particular. So this is about experiences maybe living temporarily in your car or with family or friends. So, I mean, you look at that slide and you think, well, Waterloo looks like it's, those numbers aren't too bad. That's about only 1 in 20. But I really encourage you to think about this. If we think about 1 in 20 as having these experiences, if we even think about an average classroom, then that could likely be the reality of at least one student in each classroom in every school in Waterloo. So it's also a concerning piece where we're noticing experiences of homelessness or stress around affordable housing as creeping up steadily from those who are working with young people and families in our community. So I'm guessing it's an issue already on your minds, but wanted to reinforce it through what we're hearing in our data. Next slide, please. This is a question here that's looking at opportunities to enjoy nature. So here we can see almost 9 in 10 young people in Waterloo agree that there are plenty of opportunities to enjoy nature in their neighborhood. However, at the same time, we could see the next slide. We also can take note that when we look at responsibility to help protect the natural environment, we can see Waterloo youth are a bit less likely to agree compared to the last slide, that they felt a personal responsibility to help protect the natural environment. And next slide, please. And this is the last slide I'll just share with you today with the data, and it's about access to recreation and cultural facilities. For young people in Waterloo who participated in this survey, it was particularly strong, the access piece. However, again, let's keep in mind that for about 1 in 3, they did not agree that the facilities were easy for them to get to. So next slide. I am so glad that we could spend a few moments with you today. Usually we would have one of our Youth Connector staff attend and share this information, and you could ask questions directly of them. So I'm honored on behalf of them to be here to share it, because of course they're in school right now. But we will make sure, if you don't have access to the reports, please let me know so we can make sure you have them. And then Garanka's just going to leave you here on the last slide with some final thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Allison. As we look at the last slide here, it's really our invitation to you for some calls to action. We have been really honored and have really welcomed youth voices into our conversation. And it's been really quite remarkable, I think, for all of us, maybe not so young folks, to really recognize the importance of our youth voices. And the young people have really appreciated sharing their thoughts about different perspectives of their own communities and what's important to them. So it has been a real honor to work with them. We're really hoping that these data that we've shared with you today will become an important source of information as you move forward to inform your own decision making about different aspects of your governance. And we also hope that you will consider different ways to hear from our youth on a more regular basis. It's certainly something that we are working on consistently, and we will continue to do that. And finally, we know that our youth are very interested in identifying very meaningful actions for change, and they want to be a part of that. So we invite you to think about that as you do your work. We will continue to do our work. We'll continue to look for opportunities to engage our youth and our children in our community and to hear their voices in a more consistent way. Thanks so much for the time that you've given us to share some of this information with you.
Thank you very much, Granka and Allison. I do have some questions here from councillors. First up is Councillor Henry. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Allison and Granka, for coming to visit us today. I've appreciated the emails into my inbox from these monthly snippets, and it's always one of the first things I try to read. And in terms of how these get incorporated, I know as our staff sort of set up to get the next council ready for a strategic planning process, certainly this data will be one of the many pieces that fold in for the new council to look at as they consider strategic plan for the next 4 years. I did have two questions. One, I think, for you folks, and then one for Commissioner Dykstra, arising from the presentation. First, as you're highlighting that we should be considering how the voices of young people can be heard more regularly by the City of Waterloo, I'm wondering if you have any specific advice, if there's a place to start, if there's some key things we should think about or know as our staff, various staff teams and council try to incorporate that into our public engagement work.
Thank you for that question. Allison, I wonder if you might be able to share some of the things that we have heard from our young people so far about this.
Sure thing. I'll be happy to start that off. So thank you so much for your interest in the work and for your question. I think my general go-to response is to talk to the young people of Waterloo. We continue to remind ourselves that they're the experts in their lives and in what they want. And it has always served us well when we have taken the time to talk to young people about how they would ideally see something coming together. So if you're considering, different structures or different ways that there's maybe formal processes, I would suggest talking with young people. And I would also offer that we can help with that. We have someone on our team named Joanna, and she is in the position of youth engagement in systems lead, and she can be a great coach and support to organizations as they're going along this journey. And the second piece of advice I might offer is don't limit yourselves to what you think young people are interested in. So meaning sometimes there's departments or areas of work that people might think, well, that's going to appeal to young people. I would suggest that young people are your young citizens, and anything that you would be interested in citizen input or engagement on, they can offer you some valuable thoughts, even if it might not be a traditional space that you would think of including them.
Thanks, Allison. I might just add some practical pieces to that as well. I think as you continue with your work and are inviting focus group feedback to really, or other kind of feedback from our local citizens to really ensure that you highlight and invite youth specifically, and even to be, to look for multiple ways for them to offer feedback, the times of the day when, some of these focus groups might be held, and to allow for, recognizing, when their days might be busy. As of today, they're in school right now. So ensuring that we engage them and make space for them to participate when they are available.
Thank you for those. And it has, among many different things that pop to mind, one idea perhaps for our team is thinking about what engagement we can do when we again have our annual service center open house. There's lots of things we try to showcase, but there's probably lots of input we can gather from the folks that are most interested about our very detailed work with the city. I wanted to ask Commissioner Dykstra, just sort of building on this data. So we have this data. We're one of the many partners that has this data and has the ability to engage on it. Can you give us some insight on how we sort of have or will be sort of translating the findings out of this into the work that we're doing here at City Hall? I'm always sort of curious about, so we have this, then what? And I'm wondering what you can tell me about the then what for the City of Waterloo.
Thank you, Councillor Henry, through the Mayor. excellent question, and I was hoping for this response. Like we're connected on the planning table at a director level, staff level as well, and part of the conversation and how we can use the data is we've done some work on program review within our service delivery. How does that fit in? We're going to examine how our spaces can be better utilized to service youth and other groups as well moving forward. How we build that into future recreation master plans. That's some work that we're deliberating on, and we'll present to the next council to further strengthen active use of our facilities, active program that we deliver through our staff teams, and where we can partner with new groups that need to connect with us and connect with the broader community where they're living, and make sure we're listening as well and seeing where we can go in the future. So I'm excited about the path forward too, as we use this data and deliver future service at the City of Waterloo.
No, thank you for that, Commissioner. Before turning it back to my colleagues, I'll just relay sort of a short story from I think 12 years ago when I first started knocking on doors for council. I remember encountering one door with a young child, perhaps around the ages of 9 or 10, and who probably shouldn't have answered the door when his parents weren't home. But I encourage candidates, to not just sort of ask the kid for their parents to come. Ask the kid who opens the door the same questions you might ask of the adults that you might be seeking votes from. We had a great conversation about our facilities and about skateboard parks, and at that time we were just getting ready to construct our first, and the eyes lit up when we were able to talk about the work that we were doing on some of that. So it's I encourage everyone who's listening in because they're thinking of running, to make sure you talk to everybody who opens the door when you go around the community. You'll learn just as much from the kids as you will from the adults, and the kids tell the adults, and the adults remember. So there's a positive to all of that as well. So thank you for everyone coming.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Henry. I truly agree with that. They got to listen to the kids. Kids have all the ideas. Next up, I have Councillor Vasek.
Thanks to you, Mayor Jaworski. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Henry, for those questions. And thank you for your presentation. My question is just a very specific sub-question of Councillor Henry's, which is, I feel like a decade ago, youth advisory or youth action councils were really popular. And there are pros and cons to those. Who shows up, who doesn't? Are they a representative sample of the whole community? There are challenges with committees in general. But I'm just curious if in your work you have also been doing some follow-up or research on youth advisory or action councils. Are they relevant? Are youth interested in participating? Will they do what we hope they do? Or is it more like sort of what you were speaking to before, which is more about participation on specific projects and having their voice heard through engagement in that way? So just curious about your thoughts generally about youth advisory / action councils. And then if you have any thoughts on participatory budgeting processes with youth, which I've heard of some really neat examples from Ann Arbor. Yeah, anyways, just curious about that very niche specific area. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Allison. I wonder if you'd like to start, and then I can add.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. So again, I mentioned Joanna on our team. This is a big area of interest of hers, in particular governance and leadership models when it comes to engagement of young people. And I think she would agree with you that I think what she would say is that the advisory council or youth advisory council is it can be quite a valuable tool, but it's an often overused tool. So it's often a default model, let's say, that some organizations will go for because maybe they haven't considered or they don't know what else could be out there. And so they can serve a very good purpose, but I think the scope of where their value lies is a lot more narrow than most would hope it to be. So again, Joanna has done her own research, and I understand there's not a ton out there, but on alternative models. And so again, Councillor Vasic, I can at any point connect her with you if that's of interest. And I think what we have found, again, to your point, you do attract some young people to those spaces, which I would term a traditionally adult space, like an advisory council. I think to many of us feels familiar, and we kind of understand like what that structure is, at least implicitly. So again, young people who are comfortable in adult dominated or adult designed spaces are probably going to enjoy it. And then where are there other spaces that are maybe more youth centric or youth designed that might be an even better fit, or at least a great complementary fit?
Yeah, thanks, Allison. I think what I would add to that is that, for some of our youth that are a little bit more perhaps challenging to engage, what some of the information that I've certainly heard and some of the research is that they're much more apt to be engaged around an issue rather than just kind of a conceptual abstract concept like an advisory group. So that is something to kind of consider. And just to add to what Allison is saying, we do have on staff, we have Joanna and we have some youth connectors. And I think that it might be interesting to ask them what their thoughts are around some of these pieces. And we would be pleased to do some of that work and connect Joanna back to you if you'd like to continue the conversation.
Yes, I would very much. Thank you so much for your responses. And yes, if you could connect to me, I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll turn over to Councillor Bonagor. And I think your questions are for staff. I'll just do a quick check for any other questions. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Bonagor, and then I'll see if there's any further from any other colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you for bringing all of this forward. It's really helpful and insightful to, I think, to kind of see the, how, just the graphs of what it's telling us. But my question is for staff, and it actually links onto something Councillor Vasic was just talking about. And I'm just wondering if the city has ever tried participatory budgeting where potentially youth get to allocate a certain amount of city spending. Is that something we've considered, that we've tried, or is it potentially something we could explore?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bonagor, Commissioner Dykstra speaking here. I recall, the broader adult outreach on participatory budgeting. We did, if I recall, and maybe Felipe Reynolds is on the call if she can add in maybe some outreach on playgrounds, maybe an item that was more youth focused. We have done our capital projects when we do connect with the youth, i.e. the skate parks in the past, a strong connection point, and then we go into, hey, if we can do X, Y, or Z on this location, what would you like to see? And so we've tried to draw that feedback there. So I'll see if Felipa, through her recollection on participatory budgeting, can offer any further insights.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Bonagor, and just to support what Commissioner Dykstra just said, project-specific engagement that one could look at as participatory budgeting has been happening. A specific allocation of money to be used in a very traditional way through participatory budgeting for students or even other groups hasn't really been implemented. The city a few years ago did work with the Laurier students, the Laurier MBA students, to develop some engagement related tools, one of which was participatory budgeting in terms of determining if that was, an effective tool for engagement. And the students actually conducted an experiment on Laurier campus with, various games and whatnot to see the kind of engagement that it would generate. We took that information back along with quite a number of other recommendations And we've incorporated that knowledge rather into our own ongoing planning for engagement, if you will, as we're in I'm looking for the word, proceeding through the budget processes. As you know, of course, we do multi-year budgeting. And so there are a couple of years there where we're not going through a full process. So this is one of the tools that, we have been looking at, but in its traditional form, I would say, because there are sort of hybrids of it, I'd say in its traditional form, we haven't used it in that particular way. But as Commissioner Dykstra has indicated, there have been other similar types of engagement done specifically with students on specific projects. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. Thank you to both of you. The one thing that strikes me is the projects you're talking about are, to quote the previous speakers, things that we assume youth are interested in. So going forward, I mean, I would be very curious to know what youth make of our public realm strategy and the prioritizing of projects for our shared spaces and things like that. This is not something we shall solve today, but I just think it's really good to have these discussions. And I just want to thank the delegates again for bringing this forward so that we can kind of bring these discussions out and hopefully have people weigh in on them as well. So thank you. That's it from me, Mayor.
Excellent, thank you. And with that, I see that's the end of questions that I have from Council. I'd like to thank Allison and Garanka for coming today, and to keep. I like the way that you're putting the information out there in sort of more bite-sized chunks, and I think that we can look into it and maybe take some hope that the investments that we're doing in our parks, like we're doing at the splash pads, and we have Alexandra Park was part in the past few years, and all these parks, maybe it really does help reach out to youth, and they realize that they have a lot of park and nature opportunities, even though we are an urban environment in Waterloo. But anyway, thank you very much, and we'll look forward for future updates to our council.
Thank you again on behalf of the planning table. And Allison, I thank you for your time and your interest in our work.
Now moving on, we're into staff reports. And the first one is, a very lengthy and detailed report on the progress on our neighborhood strategy implementation year 3, and really is somewhat a continuation of the last topic we just had in terms of making things better and feeling a sense of belonging. It's prepared by Amy Ross and Julie Legg, who are here for any questions of clarification on their report. I'll turn over to Councillor Hanmer for a comment. Please go ahead.
Great, Mayor, thank you. Through you to Amy and Julie, thank you very much for the report. I always look forward to reading the strategy and how far we've come and the things that have gone forward. I guess I do have a bit of a question too. What would you say is the biggest hurdle you've had to overcome, and things that we should be focusing on as you continue to implement the rest of the strategy?
So to Councillor Hanmer through the mayor. So I would say one challenge that we've had with this strategy, and this is going to be no surprise to anyone, is just it hasn't been a normal couple years with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think part of what we're looking forward to in the coming years is, having a bit more of that community connection and going back to things in person. So that's one challenge, but not so much maybe what you were getting at. So another thing that we have seen as a challenge is just moving forward new things that take time. So I would say just, continued support of the community and what they're doing, and understanding that does take time. And that's been, I think, a big challenge for the strategy.
And a focus going forward. Thank you, Julie, for that. I wonder with our just recent presentation from the Child and Youth Planning table, whether continuing to include the youth from the neighborhoods in making some of the decisions, and potentially looking at the associations, if there are associations or groups, to make sure that they're reaching out to the youth as well, and there could be more leadership opportunities there as well. You're doing a wonderful job, and I think we have made great strides in further advancing the sense of belonging with our neighborhoods. So thank you for all of your time and efforts in making this work. That's it from me, Mayor.
Thank you. Over to Councillor Freeman.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just wanted to also thank you for the report, and just to point out how effective I found the neighborhood team to be. I've had a couple of instances in my ward where people needed to get in touch with the team on a weekend because of, I guess we were giving out, they needed some financial assistance on a weekend, and I guess the tools that we'd provided with them weren't working, and our team was really incredibly fast to respond. And I've just found that to be the case. The things that we were looking for as a council, that nimbleness, the willingness to work with neighborhood associations to get things done, trying to lessen the red tape, trying to find tools around insurance requirements, all the things that we spoke about when we talked about this neighborhood strategy, I can really see staff trying to implement, and I just wanted to thank them for that.
For sure. I think you speak on behalf of all council, Councillor Freeman, in terms of the great things. And I wasn't kidding. It was going through that report, and it was dozens, it felt like even hundreds of different things were itemized in there, and each one of them has had a great impact in our community. So I would like to thank, on behalf of all of us, the neighborhood teams for all their efforts. It's really job well done in trying times, for sure. So thank you very much, Julie. Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And with that, I move on to item B, which is the disconnecting from work policy, a report prepared for us by Natasha Gramusa, and Natasha's on the line. Should anyone have any questions? I would say, I think just since this has really come to light, it's really become something I've really tried on, is trying to not send any emails at night, which is very difficult, but on the weekends, I really try hard, and it's become a lot more easier, and creating calendar entries on Monday to remind myself to get some things out, and some things have solved themselves, and just restrict myself to urgent items over the weekend. And I'd like to, I think this will be, it's a policy that seems to be good and good for you. So I'd like to thank staff for that. I'll just look to see if I have any questions from council. Oh, and Councillor Hanmer's reminding me we didn't move that recommendation, and same with Councillor Bonagor. But since I'm over here on disconnecting from work policy, we'll go back to that one. Does anybody have any questions on the disconnecting from work policy? And if not, I'll look for a mover for item B at this point in time. Moved by Councillor Bonagor, seconded by Councillor Bodley. We'll do the vote on item B, disconnecting from work policy, beginning with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too, and thanks to my council colleagues for the reminder. I was so excited about all the things going on and the progress on the neighborhood strategy implementation year 3, item A. Since I did have reminders from Councillor Hanmer and Councillor Bonagor, I'll take you as movers and seconders on that. And with that, we'll do the voting beginning with Ward 1, please.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too, and that solidifies recommendation part 2, that council continues to champion the implementation of this strategy. Moving on to item C, it's the award of tender, RFT 22-12, construction services for Bechtel Park Creek Rehabilitation. Report prepared to us by Jessica Brown. There is no presentation, but I'm sure Jessica's here for any questions. I'll just look around. The virtual council chamber, looking for hands. Looking for hands to consider moving it. Moved by, I'll give it to Councillor Vasic, hometown hero for this one. Seconded by Councillor Henry. We'll do the voting beginning with Ward 1, please.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries. Thank you very much, Jessica and team. Moving on to item D in the revised agenda, which is the land acquisition of 535 Beaver Creek Road. A report prepared for us by Christina Marina, who's here for any questions. And just pause for a second. Moved by Councillor Bodley. Seconded by Councillor Bonagor. And with that, we'll do the vote beginning with Ward 1, please.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Christina, for that recommendation. Now, we move into the formal public meetings. And if you would like to speak at the public planning meeting today, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705. That's 519-747-8705. To be added to the list of delegations, we have 3 items up today, 1 this afternoon, and I will get started. This is a formal, let's make sure I have the right one here. This is a formal public meeting to consider zoning bylaw amendment Z2204, temporary use zoning bylaw 695 Rupert Street, Ian Cook Construction Limited. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner, John Voss, at 519-747-8527, or at john.voss@waterloo.ca, and that's spelled john.vos@waterloo.ca. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of this meeting and the dates notice was given? And just one moment while we redirect microphones.
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on May 12th, 2022, and mailed or emailed on May 10th, 2022, to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, to public agencies, and all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting that was held on Monday, April 11th, 2022, and to all persons who requested further notice.
Excellent. Thank you. The planner, John Voss, will now give us a brief overview of the application. Welcome, John.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, city staff, and the public. Just making sure that my microphone's working okay.
Sounds great, John.
Perfect. So as noted, this is the formal public meeting for application Z2204 regarding the temporary use bylaw for 695 Rupert Street. Next slide, please. The subject site is adjacent to the intersection of Rupert Street and Bathurst Drive. It is developed with a multi-unit industrial building which contains various uses, including offices and a company that produces waffle cones. Next slide, please. This application is for a temporary use bylaw to permit a spiritual use and community uses in a portion of the existing building for up to 3 years. This will allow All Saints Anglican Church and various community uses at 400 Northfield Drive West to continue to operate while 400 Northfield Drive West is being redeveloped. Staff recommend that the temporary use zoning bylaw be approved for only 2 years instead of 3. This should provide sufficient time for the new church to be constructed at 400 Northfield Drive West, after which 695 Rupert Street would return to an industrial use. Should additional time be required due to unforeseen circumstances, Council can grant an extension to the temporary use zoning bylaw for up to an additional 3 years. Next slide, please. Staff recommend that Council approve zoning bylaw amendment Z 2204 as outlined in the staff report. This concludes my presentation. Glad to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much, John. We'll just pause to hear if there are any questions. As a reminder, if any person watching would like further notice of the application, you can contact John Voss at 519-747-8527. I have a question for Councillor Bonnegar. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thanks for the information, John. I just wanted to ask, I know a lot of city projects and a lot of construction projects across the region are seeing delays due to pandemic-related backlogs and the like. So, I mean, the 2-year recommendation from staff looks good to me. Does staff feel that that does still provide enough time for the development in question, just considering the broader delays experienced by some projects right now?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Bonnegar, we're confident that 2 years should be enough. Then there's unknown circumstances that could come up, including construction timelines and contractor requirements. And if that does happen, the extension is possible. But I would note that this has proceeded through for site plan approval, and I believe they're ready to apply for the building permit. So they could start construction very soon, assuming they have a contractor and everyone lined up, but that might be a question that the applicant can provide some further details on.
Is the applicant present today?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor Jaworski, and through you to Councillor Bonnegar. We're satisfied with the 2 years at this point. The objective of the temporary use bylaw is to allow for the church use to move off-site, to then allow for demolition of the existing church, and then for the new church and the new residential development to occur in a coordinated way. So the servicing, the grading, and everything happening at the same time. So we're fairly confident in the 2 years, but as Mr. Voss has suggested, if it needs to be extended, we have the opportunity to request through staff and council consideration.
Okay, thank you for that. It's much appreciated. Thank you, Mayor. That's all from me.
Thank you. And I'll move on to Councillor Freeman. Please go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. With the temporary location of this church in this location, I'd like to ask staff whether or not it's going to be deemed by the region to be a sensitive land use that could potentially alter decision-making on the employment lands that surround this property, or if there's a way to enter into an agreement with the church such that they recognize on occasion there may be noise, odor, vibration from the adjacent industry as a result of locating near employment lands.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Freeman, it is a detail that we've explored with the region, as well as with the Ministry of Environment, who actually implement that requirement for sensitive use. And both departments or both agencies have been satisfied with the approach that we're taking, specifically about permitting it as a community center. And then any uses that are using the facility, including the church or any groups that are renting during the week, would go in knowing full well that it is an employment area, and many of these activities would be occurring in the evening when most businesses would be quiet and ceasing their operation.
Just as a follow-up, I know that there are some industries there that are 24/7. So I just want to be clear on that, that may not be the case. And so I think it's of value to seek clarity, because under the D6 guidelines, the area of influence is up to 1 kilometer. And so within 1 kilometer, there's certainly pillars, and there's a number of other industries that operate 24/7 on Bathurst.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Freeman, thanks again for the comments on that, and we'll review those necessities closer, just to make sure that all parties are fully aware of the ramifications of what's proceeding.
Thank you.
With that, I see no further questions for you, John. So thank you very much. I'll move on to our delegation, Dave Aston, MHBC. And I guess I should warn you, Dave, you only have 10 minutes. So let's see how much you can fill. I bet you not half that.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. I will not even be close to half of that. First of all, thanks to Mr. Voss. We've been working with him and city staff and responding to the various agency comments through the process. I think this is a good example of where opportunity is seen as needing to adjust for development and coordination on one property, and finding opportunity to make sure that an organization continues to stay active within the community. So we're fully supportive of the staff recommendation and the temporary use bylaw, and we'll be continuing to work with staff on the site plans. Certainly for the residential, that site plan application has been submitted, and I know that the church site plan application, as Mr. Voss has suggested, is well underway into process and could be heading in soon for a building permit. So the objective is to coordinate matters and to efficiently see construction on the land. So thanks for the consideration, and happy to answer any questions, but here fully in support.
Thank you very much, Dave. I'll just pause for a moment while I look to see if any hands go up. Not seeing any. Oh, not seeing any, Dave. I think you're off the hook. Let me just move on forward with this one. I will now check with the clerk to see if we have received any additional delegations. And I see the clerk's team is giving me a no, so we'll move on. As the clerk informs me, there are no further speakers. This formal public meeting is concluded. And the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. And I will turn it over to Councillor Freeman. Please go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So I just do want to reiterate with staff that Northfield Metals is also a 24/7 operation, which is inside 300 meters, which is inside the recommended minimum separation distance under the D6 guideline. So I want to make sure that there's nothing that inhibits the ability for the church to operate or industry to function. So I'm just going to leave that with you, recognizing that I believe it will get taken care of, because I am happy to move the motion. So whereas council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders, and whereas council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that council approve report IPPW 2022-031 and that zoning bylaw amendment Z2204 temporary use zoning bylaw Ian Cook Construction Limited for 695 Rupert Street be approved in accordance with section 5 of IPPW 2022-031.
Is that the end of it? I sometimes lose track of it. I'll assume that's the end.
I think that's the end of it. It's the motion to approve the application, not the motion to deny the application.
Yeah. Awesome. And with that, I have Councillor Hanmer has raised her hand to second it. And this is all good for the church in Councillor Veith's ward. I'm sure she'll be very pleased. I don't see any hands going up to debate this, so I'll start the voting beginning with Ward 1, please.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vasek in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you, John and team, for your work on this. Dave for marshaling it through as well. With that, I will note that we do have formal planning meetings coming up later tonight. If you'd like to be a delegate for those, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705. And with that, we stand in recess until this evening's meeting, resuming at 6:30, call in around 6:10, 6:15. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.